Hi everyone, my name is Mary Ivy Rinquijo and I will be presenting today chapter 11 along with my co-presenter Mr. John Harold Gordoncillo. And chapter 11, Measurement of Variables, Operational Definition. Now, if we are to conduct a research and if we are evaluating influence of variables to the other, we need to measure them or we need to measure these variables. Unless we properly measure that variable, we cannot have a proper results. Results are valid and results are reliable. So today we have objectives. So at the end of this chapter, we should be able to explain how variables are measured, explain when operationalization of variables are necessary, operationally defined or operationalized abstract and subjective variables. So measurement of the variables is an integral part of research and an important aspect of research design. Failure to do so, obviously we cannot conduct a research because what we are trying to do here is evaluate the impact of one variable on the other. So if you cannot measure variable properly, you cannot assess its impact. Unless the variables are measured in some way, we will not be able to find answers to our research questions. Surveys and experimental designs discussed in the previous chapters often use questionnaires to measure the variable of interest. In this chapter, we will discuss how variables lend themselves to measurement. So, how variables are measured? First, to test the hypothesis that workforce diversity affects organizational effectiveness, we have to measure workforce diversity and organizational effectiveness. For example, if you want to measure the impact of transformational or transitional leadership on project success, so we need to have or we have to measure both variables. Measurement is the assignment of numbers or other symbols to characteristics or attributes of objects according to a specified set of roles or rules. So what we do here is we are associating numbers or symbols to characteristics or attributes of the objects. So what are these objects? So objects includes persons, strategic business units, companies, countries, bicycles, elephants, kitchen appliances, restaurants, shampoo, yogurt, and so on. So anything could be an object, anything that has characteristics or attributes. So examples of characteristics of an object are arousal-seeking tendency. Obviously, this pertains to a human being. Achievement, motivation as well. Organizational effectiveness pertains to an organization. Shopping enjoyment for a human being as well. Length, weight, ethnic diversity, service quality, conditioning effects, and the taste. So characteristics used to describes an object. It is important also that you realize that you cannot measure objects alone. For instance, a company, you cannot measure a company alone. You measure characteristics or attributes of the object. For instance, the organizational effectiveness of a company. So your object here is the company and your the characteristic or the attribute is the organizational effectiveness. In similar fashion, you can measure the length, the attribute of a person, the object, the weight of an elephant, the arousal seeking tendency of stockbrokers, the shopping enjoyment of women, the service quality of a restaurant as well, the conditioning effect of the shampoo, and the taste of the certain brand of yogurt. To be able to measure, you need to you need an object and attributes of the object, but you also need a judge. A judge is someone who has necessary knowledge and skills to assess the quality of something, such as the taste of the yogurt, the arousal seeking tendency of stockbrokers, the communication skills of the students. In many cases, the object and the judge are the same person. So you will be so you need someone to rate the attributes. So for a measurement, you need two things, the object and the attributes to define, or you need attributes to define, you need to define the attributes and the characteristics. For instance, if you want to measure the gender, this is the attribute of your employees, the object, or the shopping enjoyment of the women. You can simply ask the objects to provide you with the necessary details via a self-administered questionnaire. So in instance, the same, it's to say that the judge is the same person. So, however, it is unlikely that the object has the necessary knowledge and the skills to act as the judge. When you want to measure a taste, the attribute of the yogurt, the object, the service quality of a restaurant, the communication skills of the students, or even the managerial expertise of the supervisors. So the yogurt cannot assess its own taste, or the restaurant cannot assess its own service quality, as well as the students. They cannot assess their communication skills. It should be someone else. The supervisors. There should be someone else who can assess the managerial expertise of that supervisor. So in this case, there is someone who acts as the judge, not the same person. So example here is that, for example, is that if I were to judge the service quality of a restaurant, who will be the best judge to provide me with that? So it's someone who has eaten in that restaurant. So it is someone, or the judge is someone directly affected by the object, or someone who will be the consumer of that particular object. In this case, the object cannot be judged of its own attributes. Next is attributes of objects that can be physically measured by some calibrated instruments pose no measurement problems. So there are also objects whose attributes or characteristics are easily measured. For example, the length and the width of the rectangular office table can be easily measured with a measuring tape or a ruler. The same is true with measuring the office floor area and for measuring the weight of the elephant. Data representing several demographic characteristics of office personnel are also easily obtained by asking employees simple, straightforward questions such as, how long have you been working in this organization? Or what is your marital status? So that these are easily measured attributes of objects. However, there are more abstract and subjective attributes that is very difficult to measure. For instance, it is relatively difficult to measure the level of achievement motivation of office clerks, the shopping enjoyment of women, or the need for cognition of students. These are very subjective. Likewise, it is not straightforward to test hypotheses on the relationship between workforce diversity, managerial expertise, and organizational effectiveness. The problem is that we cannot simply ask questions like, how diverse is your company's workforce? Or how effective your organization? Because of the abstract nature of variables, workforce diversity and organizational effectiveness. So these are very subjective. These are abstract, and concepts are actually changed or changing from object to object. So you need to properly measure these concepts. So the question is, how do we measure these abstract or subjective concepts? So we now go to this. operational definition or operationalization. First, despite the lack of physical measuring device to measure the more nebulous variables, there are ways of tapping these types of variable. One technique is to reduce these abstract notions or concepts to observable behavior and or characteristics. For instance, the concept of a thirst is abstract. We cannot see it. However, we would expect a thirsty person to drink plenty of fluids. In other words, the expected reason or reaction of people to thirst is to drink fluids. If several people say they are thirsty, then we may determine the level of thirst of each of these individuals by the measure of the quality of fluids that they drink to quench their thirst. We will thus be able to measure their level of thirst, even though the concept of thirst itself is abstract and nebulous. Reduction of abstract concepts to render them measurable in a tangible way is called operationalizing the concepts. Operationalizing is done by looking at the behavioral dimensions, facets, or properties denoted by the concept. These are then translated into observable and measurable elements so as to develop an index of measurement or measurement of the concept. Operationalizing a concept involves a series of steps. The first step is to come up with the definition of the construct that you want to measure. Then it is necessary to think about the content of the measure, that is, an instrument that actually measure the concept that one wants to measure has to be developed. Subsequently, a response format, for instance, a 7-point rating scale will end points with endpoints anchored by strongly disagree and strongly agree is needed. And finally, the validity and the reliability of the measurement scale has assessed. So that's operational definition or operationalization. So we have just reduced the abstract concept thirst into observable behavior by measuring the amount of drinks people use to quench their thirst. Other abstract concepts such as the need for cognition will further discussed by my co-presenter, Mr. John Harold Gordoncillo. So this ends my report. I will now give you to Mr. Gordoncillo. Thank you so much for listening.